So guys, ladies and gentlemen, one of my good friends, Donnie Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you, bud. I appreciate that. I want to tell you a story. As you already know, I've been a high school basketball coach for over 30 years. I love coaching. I love being in the gym with my players. You know, you have different talents, different personalities, and taking those group of kids and molding them into a team that's committed to each other. There is nothing in the world like it. I miss it. I love the smell of a gym. Well, it's been 2 years ago, I teach math. I love teaching. And I was starting my day as I always do. I'm walking to my classroom. I put the key in the door to start my day. And all of a sudden, I get a yell down the hall from one of my colleagues. Hey, there's the famous basketball coach that inspired Jason Sudeikis' new show, Ted Lasso. Well, to be honest with you, I knew absolutely nothing about it. Zero. So that night, nothing, zero. And I'm sure my look on my face probably showed that. So I went home that night, and my wife and I started watching the show, and we got hooked on it. It's a very endearing show. And as we're watching the show, my wife points up to the screen and says, "Yeah, Donnie, that's you." And again, I didn't see it. However, I did see many of the lessons that I taught Jason and his teammates 30 years ago being applied on a show about a football soccer coach. This is a sign that I have I've had in locker rooms that I coached. I have that currently in my classroom. You know, it's truly surreal. It's humbling to know that you made an impact on somebody's life. And it's thrilling to hear my name when Jason talks about the show. And I am extremely humbled to be here and honored to talk to you about what I believe is important in leadership, about being kind and speaking greatness into people. Now, I know there's a question you have for me. It's the same question I get throughout the country when I speak or I get interviewed. What kind of basketball player was Jason Sudeikis? I know you have that question, right? Well, Jason was a left-handed point guard, and he liked to do some things. His passes, he liked putting a little more pastry on things than I really liked. Behind the back, between the legs, jump up in the air, gyrate and make a no-look pass. And he didn't always play the kind of defense that I wish he played. He liked to play offense. In fact, he was brought out on a TV morning show that I nicknamed him Jason Sudeikis. I took the D out of his name. He liked to play offense, but he was a really joy to coach. He's a great teammate. That group of kids that I coached at Shawnee Mission West 30 years ago, they still text each other. They still text me. In fact, I got a picture, it's been probably about a year ago. Jason was in Las Vegas at a Foo Fighters. Is that the name of the band? Foo Fighters concert. And he sent it to me. He says, "Coach, make sure you don't send it out, but I was thinking of you." I think of, some stories about Jason. We used to play when I was head coach at Shawnee Mission West. We used to go to Lee Summit and play in a tournament there. And, we were playing the third place game. We played 3 games. We were playing in, I call the Sun Bowl game, where you're playing in the afternoon, not at night, because we lost our semifinal game. And during the game, Jason would be wide open for a layup. I mean, there wasn't a defender within 50 feet of him. Teammate, of course, gave him a perfect pass. And instead of shooting the layup, he would pass it back out to his teammates. And I couldn't figure out as the game progressed, what the heck is going on here? Well, after the game, I found out from one of his teammates that he knew he was close to the assist record, and he was trying to break it. I'm not making this stuff up. Okay. But it's just, now, I was not very happy about it, to be honest with you. I also think about we'd play Friday night games. And, of course, we'd practice on Saturday, and we'd always practice at 9 a.m. Well, these 9 o'clock morning practices, the kids would come, look like they'd been out all night, and probably had been, who knows. So I just said, that's fine. You guys want to go out, we're going to start practicing at 5 a.m. Well, come to find out, Jason, after all our Friday night games, was going to different comedy clubs throughout Kansas City, watching different comedians perform. His mind was on basketball, but he was thinking in the future, wasn't he? It's an unbelievable story. He never missed practice. He's probably getting home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Never missed practice, was never late. During COVID, when this show was, it started, we got to watch it at home, and he found out one of his teammates has a t-shirt business here in Kansas City. And somehow he found out that the t-shirt business wasn't doing very well, as many businesses weren't during COVID. So Jason calls him up and says, hey, send me those t-shirts. I'll start wearing them on the show. Rest is history. His business just skyrocketed. He couldn't keep the t-shirts on the shelves. That kind of commitment and caring, I'm so proud of Jason, but that's for 30 years, that's the kind of players I coached. They really cared for each other and they were committed to each other. So it made me so very proud. Now, I want you to think about this. What is a coach? What is a leader? To me, a coach is someone who sees potential and does everything in their power to develop that potential to be successful in whatever they're doing. And hopefully they end up being great. So when I first started coaching, and my first head coaching job was a long time ago, well, probably maybe before some of you were even born. And I was all about one thing, and one thing only. Ted Lasso says this, I do love the smell of a locker room. It smells like potential. Well, when I first started coaching again, I didn't think in those terms because a coach is so much more than a motivator, a strategist. He is so many things. And I really, starting out, really didn't know. I was about one thing and one thing only, and that was winning. Period. I was going to do everything I could to make sure that my team was the most prepared, most fundamentally sound team that stepped on that basketball floor. How did we do that? Practice. We worked on zone defense, fast breaking, man-to-man defense, getting the ball reversed, all those things that you do in practice. I worked them hard and long. We played hard in practice and we played hard in the game. And I did everything to make sure that our teams were so prepared. And that first season, after focusing on winning, I led our team to a 3-18 record. And for you, that's 3 wins and, okay, you know what 18 is, right? So after that disastrous first season, I had some questions. What was I doing? What was I doing wrong? How was I doing it wrong? Ted Lasso says you could fill 2 internets with what I know about football. That's how I felt coaching basketball, a game that I'd played and coached for so many years. Had so many questions. How many in leadership positions or started a new leadership position know what I'm talking about? It's amazing, isn't it? When you're an assistant coach, you set 18 inches to the left of the head coach and you make suggestions, don't you? You move 18 inches to the right, you're the leader, you have to start making decisions. Totally different. I'm sure all of you have been there. You have your own business, you're all entrepreneurs, correct? Tough decisions you have to make. So I had some tough decisions to make. I needed to change. So I came across this definition by John Wooden. If you don't know who John Wooden was, he's probably the greatest coach of any sport of all time. He won 10 national championships at UCLA. And his definition of success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you did your best to become the best you're capable of becoming. That hit home with me. That resonated with me. I was doing everything backwards. I was trying to get my kids to be really, really good basketball players instead of developing them as people, developing them as leaders. When you create better people, you create winning teams. So after that first year, we changed everything in our program. We started focusing on developing our kids to be better people first. So after that 3-18 season, the second season we ended up being 6-15. We won 3 more games. Yeah. They still believed in me. They didn't fire me, right? And then the third season we ended up being 11-10 and had a winning record. I left after that third season to go to Shawnee Mission West to be the head coach, where I coached Jason. And 2 years after that, that program ended up winning a state championship. You see, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great lesson for me. And that's what I've tried to do since then. Isn't it interesting we all learn through our own frustrations? It's amazing. How many of you right now are maybe having some challenges in your life? You know, adversity. All of us have it, correct? Whether it be in your business, home, personal life, whatever it might be. And we were trying to teach our kids to embrace adversity. So when we started doing this, creating better people who would then become winning teams, what I figured out was this. When you have a team and you develop them as talented players, you might have a great group of kids that are very talented, but they're not going to play together. But when you develop these people, these players, your team members, to be better people, that ends up being sustainable success, which is what we all want. So as we were going through this culture change, if you will, I came up with my MVP. My MVP. It's your mission, your values, and your plan. Of course, our mission was to create better people who would then become better players. That was our emphasis from our second year. As a leader, setting the right example makes all the difference. I've been so blessed. I want you to think about who's mentored you, who's guided you. I had tremendous mentors. I'm sure you think of your parents, right? I had great parents. But I had my first year out of college, I was an assistant coach for a tremendous head coach. We started a brand new basketball program, brand new high school. And if you've ever started a new business or been in a brand new situation, it comes with a lot of challenges. We had no tradition to fall on. And one night we're playing a game. It was an away game against a rival school. And the opposing coach was just yelling and screaming at the officials. I mean, just intimidating the officials. And I felt like he was getting calls and helping their team. And our coach just coached. He didn't get up and yell and scream at the officials. I'm sure you've been to games that coaches are yelling and screaming. You've probably been to your own kids' games, right? Coach didn't do that. We ended up losing that night. So we went home on the bus. We're sitting on the bus, driving home, and I can still remember, it's been over 30 years ago. I still see Coach's face. And I said, Coach, can I ask you a question? I always sat with him on the bus. So I said, Coach, tonight, that was not fair. That coach intimidated officials. You know, you needed to get up and do the same thing. And Coach looked at me and he said this: if I have to act like a horse is behind to win games, then it's probably time for me to get out of it. You see, my mentor have values and standards how you treat people. He felt like his example to his players, to his coaches, to anybody around him was so important. This is one of my greatest, I feel like one of my best leadership quotes I have. Your example in leadership is not the main thing, it's the only thing. If you want people to work hard, you better work hard. If you want people to be kind, you need to be kind. And I had a great example from my head coach, my mentor over 30 years ago. Ted Lasso says, "You say impossible." This is one of my favorite quotes of Ted Lasso. "You say impossible, but all I hear is I'm possible." So here we are trying to develop our players to be the best people they can be, but we really didn't know what we were looking for. What did we want from our players? What did we want? If somebody walked into our gym, I've always said this, if somebody walked into our gym that was blind and walked in there, they should know within a half an hour what we emphasize. Think about your business, what you do. People ought to be able to walk in there within a half an hour and know what you truly emphasize. So we were looking for, in our players, I'm possible players that believed in themselves and believed in each other, which would create teams that were possible. So we came up with this, our values. Some cultures call it standards. For me, it was values. It's how I try to live my life. First is trust. You can't have trust without honesty, right? I have a friend of mine that played for the Chiefs, and now he's got numerous businesses, and he's been very successful. And I'd always have these people come speak to my teams. And I asked him one time, I said, "How did you get so successful? I mean, you're not that good looking, you're not that smart. How did you get to be successful?" And he just gave me one simple thing. I do what I say I'm going to do, period. You do what you say you're going to do. People have to be able to trust you. And secondly, I think trust is action too, isn't it? It's your behaviors every day. Kids want more playing time when you coach them, right? Workers want more responsibility, correct? Well, every day do you work hard? Talk is cheap, isn't it? Your behavior tells everybody if you're committed to the team. So important. Accountability. You have to be able to hold yourself accountable to a higher standard. The best teams I coached, that group that I coached with Jason Sudeikis, that group of kids, I never had one issue off the floor. I didn't have one issue on the floor. They held each other accountable. If somebody wasn't playing defense, I didn't have to say anything. It got taken care of. If you're in a situation where you constantly have to hold the people that work for you, your team members accountable, it's not a lot of fun. But if you have a team that holds each other accountable, I promise you're going to be successful. It's very simple. Commitment. Is your team committed to what you're trying to get done? We were looking for players who are committed to our team first, who are committed to embrace their role. That's what we were looking for. That's our values. Trust, accountability, and commitment. Every team needs players with high character to be successful. When I was an assistant that first year, we had tryouts. Many of you have ever coached. Basketball coaches have to have tryouts. There's always so many jerseys, right? And when I was a head coach, I never slept for 2 weeks. I did not like tryouts. I didn't even like it when I was an assistant. So that first year, we came into that school not knowing anything about anybody. Our head coach, this is really good, I thought. He didn't want to know anything about anybody. If you go into a new situation that's brand new, you're going to hear things about people, right? My head coach and me, we didn't want to know anything about anybody. We were going to base our judgment on these players based on what we saw, not what we heard. So we had tryouts that first year. And Coach would have me bring the players in that we were going to cut. I was kind of the Grim Reaper, if you will. Wasn't a fun job. And one thing that Coach did was, He brought every player, freshmen through seniors, in and told them they had not made the team. We always talked about being an eye for an eye team, right? We looked at each other in the eye when we talked. He wanted to look them in the eye and tell them that they had not made the team. So that night, one night, he called, it was second or third night, he called me in, said, hey, go get so-and-so. Well, I thought so-and-so was the best player. So I go and get him, and I think he's just going to talk to him about, hey, you're doing a great job, keep it up. He brings him in and he cuts him. Now, the kid couldn't believe it, and I couldn't believe it. So when the young man left, I said, Coach, can I ask you, and here I am, I'm asking another question. I said, you just cut the best player. He said, Donnie, we're starting a program here. We have to have people we can count on, that we can trust. Bottom line is, when you've ever started a new business or a new basketball program, you have to have people you can lose with. Because when you start out, you're going to lose. That's just the way it works. That's just the nature of the beast, isn't it? You know, everybody wants to think that when they start out, they're just going to, no, it doesn't work that way, is it? It's kind of like a sine wave. Ted Lasso says, you know what the happiest animal on earth is? It's a goldfish. You know why? Because it has a 10-second memory. We were looking for players that could lose a game and come back the next day and be focused on getting better, focused on our team. That's what we were looking for. A good teammate needs to be coachable. My first year as a head coach, and I already mentioned that disastrous first year, 3-18, correct? I'm fortunately I had a really good AD that really liked me, right? We were 3-18, and there's so many challenges that first year, so many things that I learned. Well, I had a young man who was, again, the best player. The best player. And this is a smaller school, so you really didn't have cuts. So everybody got to be on the team. Well, I had numerous sit-downs with this young man. He was not very coachable, and he wasn't a very good teammate. And I was working with him. I'd call him into the locker room, and I'd sit down with him, and I'd talk to him. You got to have those difficult conversations. If you're a leader, if you're not willing to have those difficult conversations, then you shouldn't be in that position, because you're going to have those. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? So finally, after numerous sit-downs with this young man, we were Saturday morning practice. I'd had enough. I kicked him off the team. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I can still remember that Saturday morning practice when I kicked him off the team. Him throwing his practice gear at me and calling me some names I can't repeat. So 2 days later, I get a call from his dad. Now, again, we didn't have cell phones back then, so I'm sure there was a voicemail. I don't even think we had email, to be honest with you. He wants to meet with me. So here I am, a young head coach. What do you think I'm thinking? This is not going to be much fun. So we ended up meeting. We sat down, and before I could say a word, he says, Coach, thank you. Thank you for holding my son accountable. He's been on all kinds of teams. He's always been able to do what he wants. You know, we all have rules, if you will, and standards in your organization. You can't have one person doing whatever they want. They have to do what they're supposed to do. Thank you for holding my son. He needs to understand that. When he has a job or he's on a team, he has to do what he's supposed to do. And you're the only coach that ever held him accountable. It was awesome. Now, after that meeting and after that first disastrous season, my wife and I got married. I'm going to throw a little bourbon about my wife. We've been married, we've been married 33 years. She's my best friend. She really is. Thank you. She's been so supportive. I have 3 girls. I'm proud as a peacock of them too. They're all doing well. And that's my greatest accomplishment, that I stayed with my wife for hopefully for 100 years, right? So we invited him. We got married after that first season, my wife and I did, and we invited this young man that I kicked off to our wedding. He showed up. He congratulated both of us, and we're still in contact with each other today. He'll send me a text, Coach, I got a question for you, and I'll call him. What do you think about this? He's got kids now. What do you think about doing? What do you think about this? A lot of times they just, when you're a young parent or young coach, you need to be mentored sometimes, right? He knew what he was supposed to do. He just needed me to tell him he's doing the right thing, right? People need to be held accountable. People need to be held accountable. Sometimes players need to be told what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. All of us would rather be, I saw this quote the other night and I really liked it, would rather be ruined by praise instead of saved by criticism. Correct? No one wants to be told that they're not good at what they do or they need to get better. So I had this young man when I was a head coach at that time. He was a really good three-point shooter. In fact, he's probably the best three-point shooter I ever coached. He made 9 in a state tournament game. 9. Well, after his junior year, but he wasn't a very good defender. In fact, he couldn't guard that carpeting, to be honest with you. Great kid, though. So I brought him in after his junior year. And I said, hey, I really like to use the sandwich principle when I have these meetings. I like to start with something positive, then in the middle talk about some constructive criticism, and then I like to end on a positive. And I said, hey, you're a terrific shooter. You're very coachable. You're a good teammate. However, you have got to get better defensively. People just go around you like the wind. But I really believe, though, if you'll work this summer on getting in the weight room and getting stronger, you can be good at both ends. So, and when you do that, you need to be willing as a leader to work with them. I said, hey, I'll be in the weight room. I'll help you. I'll open the gym up. I'll be there for you. So the kid had one of two things he could do after we met, right? He could pout and mope and blame me, correct? Or he could take it on as a challenge and get better. And that's what he did. He busted his tail between when we met and when we played our first game. That year, he ended up being an all-leg player for us, getting a college scholarship, and of course, he was good on both ends. People need to be told what they need to get better at. And as leaders, we need to be willing to do that. He needed to be told. But if you're willing to tell somebody that they need to get better, then you need to be able to help them. I think that's so important. Sometimes you find the right person for your team where you're least expected. This is one of my greatest stories. I love this one. You might not like it, but I love it. I spoke all over the country, but one of my former players, who was a senior leader, and when you'll hear this story, that came into my office, I was speaking at his event, and he started crying because he still remembers what happened. Well, what happened was this. There was a young man where I coach at Shawnee Mission West. Jason had already left. We had a really, really good team coming back. We had a mix of juniors and seniors. I felt like we had a state tournament team. Well, we had a new kid move in, and I saw him in the halls. Tall, good-looking kid. And then I watched some open gyms. He's a really good player. However, I was concerned a little bit about his character. He got in trouble in some classes. His grades weren't very good. He's late to school. So I really liked our team coming back. I didn't want to hurt the chemistry, so I was going to cut this young man. I was going to cut him. So about 2 to 3 nights into tryouts, and this kid was by far one of the best players when we had tryouts, I was going to call him in that night and cut him. Well, 2 of my senior leaders came in and says, Coach, you can't cut him. He can really help us. I said, okay, we'll keep him. But you better make sure he gets to school on time, that he stays up on his academics and he stays out of trouble. I kept him, and he was absolutely fabulous. We did make it to state. We ended up being state runner-up. He ended up being an all-state player and getting a Division I scholarship. Some lessons here for all of us. Great lessons for me back then. Number one is everybody deserves a second chance. Everybody. You're going to make mistakes. Doers make mistakes. If you're not making any mistakes, you're not doing anything. Secondly is you need to have an open door policy. People need to be able to come and talk to you. Those kids knew after talking with me, and I took their advice, that I really believed in them. And thirdly, you have to admit when you make a mistake. I admit it to our players throughout the season because he's played so well. I said, just think if I wouldn't have kept him, we wouldn't have made it to the state tournament. We wouldn't have been state runner-up. He wouldn't have got a college scholarship. Great lessons for me. I think it's so important in leadership. Everybody deserves a second chance. This is my classroom right now. I love to teach. They know when I repeat something, it's important. Our kids know if I repeat it, it's important. Number one is this: everybody deserves a second chance. Number two is you need to have an open door policy. People know you believe in them when you listen to them. And take their advice. You're not always going to take their advice. And number three is you need to admit when you make a mistake. Because you're going to make mistakes in the position you're at because you're a doer. Taking accountability builds better relationships and powerful teams. One night we're playing a game. I was a head coach. I've been lucky again to start two programs. One as an assistant coach and one as a head coach. And I'm sure, I think I mentioned earlier how hard it is at times when you start, whether it be a brand new business or a brand new job. It comes with a lot of challenges. You just don't know what you don't know sometimes. So I had a team, and they were a decent team. They weren't anything special, but they were fun to coach. They played hard. They competed. They loved each other. They're committed to each other. They held each other accountable. Well, we're playing a game one night, and it was nip and tuck, and the team was better than us. Our kids just played their tails off. It was a 1 and 2 point game the whole game, and with about 10 seconds to go, we're up by 1, and there's a flurry, and the ball spurts out and goes to the other end, goes out of bounds on their sideline, and it's their ball with 4 seconds to go, and they're down 1. So their coach calls timeout. So he's talking to his players about, okay, I'm sure he's setting up a play to either get to the free throw line or win, correct? And of course, I have my kids over on the sideline, and I'm talking to them about how I want this sideline out of bounds play defended. So official blows the whistle, players go out on the floor, they take the ball out of bounds. 2 of my kids don't communicate. The other team gets a great look at the basket, goes high off the backboard, goes in, they win at the buzzer by 1. Now, I was not a happy camper, to say the least. So after the game, I got on the 2 players that didn't communicate. I got on pretty good. So that night, I'm driving home, and I felt bad. I really did. These 2 kids had done everything I'd asked them to do. They worked hard. They were good leaders. They're good kids. So I texted them. I said, hey, I want to take you out to lunch tomorrow. So they met me for lunch the next day. So we all ordered, and I said, hey, guys, I want to tell you, I want to apologize to you for what I said to you after the game. You guys have been awesome all year. I said, I need to do a better job in timeout, communicating how we want things defended. And 2 is, I need to do a better job in practice preparing you for those situations. And before I got done with that last sentence, they both spoke up. Says, no, coach, that was our fault. That was our fault. They were holding themselves accountable. Those are leaders. I get goosebumps when I think about it. Those kids saying that. Those leaders. Do you have people in your organization that hold each other accountable? Or is it always you that has to hold people accountable? Look for those people that hold each other and themselves to a higher standard. When I hired coaches, and I hired a bunch of assistants. I've never lost an assistant coach in all the years that I've coached. Now, I've lost them to head coaching jobs, other jobs. But as far as just getting out of it, I never lost. I look for one thing when I hired a coach. Does that person have quality character? Is he a good person? Is she a good person? I can develop them into a good coach. But if they're not good for kids, they're not good on our team, I didn't hire them. So I think sometimes we look at things, we see this really, really good basketball player, correct? I'm just doing an example here. And we think, wow, this kid is so talented, correct? So he's really going to help us. My definition was, how is he going to help the other players be really good? That's what I looked at. So it's great to have a mission, great to have your values in place, but then you need to have a plan, correct? You need to have a plan. The steps to take to accomplish the vision and the mission. For us, it all started with practice. It all started with practice. A lot of great lessons. That's what I miss about coaching. There's so many great lessons that can be learned in practice and games. And how many, I'm sure a lot of you have played sports. You had a coach that you just dreaded practice, right? That coach is going to just run, physically made it so hard. And our practices were hard, but I didn't want them to be physically hard. I want them to be mentally challenged. Every practice. A good friend of mine just passed, Bob Knight. You guys know who Bob Knight is, correct? I don't mention Bob Knight around my wife, but Coach is a tremendous person and has mentored me so ways. He's the best teacher of the game of basketball I've ever been around, and I've seen them all. Tremendous clinician, tremendous coach. He had a quote that I always remember. Basketball, mental is to physical as 4 is to 1. So I was trying to get these kids to think. And how did I do that? We did it through disadvantage drills. 6 on 4, 5 on 4, 4 on 3. Now what does that mean? We'd have 5, let's say we're doing 5 on 4 in practice, okay? That's 5 offensive players being guarded by 4. It's a hard drill. It's a tough drill. Really, really hard drill. And why did we do that? Was doing 2 things. Number 1 was this. We got our kids to talk. We communicate now, but we don't talk, do we? We wanted our kids to communicate. If you're having issues in your business, your company, I guarantee it starts with communication. Because if you don't have great communication, there will not be trust. So we were trying to create that trust factor within our players. Secondly, if 4 could guard 5, 5 on 5 was going to be easy, wasn't it? So we were trying to create confidence from them. But with all this that we were really trying to do, the most important thing we were trying to do is teaching them to embrace adversity. We told them, we want practice like games and games like practice. We want practice harder than a game. So we were forcing our kids to really think. And our practices, again, like I mentioned earlier, if you came to our practice, if you couldn't see, you would know what we emphasized. And our kids just got better. I'm really proud about this. The kids, no teams wanted to play us in February. Our kids got better. And they loved when things got hard in the game. During a timeout, I'd say, hey, this is right. We got them right where we want them. It's hard right now, isn't it? It's tough. This is right where we want to be. And our kids they knew it. In our locker room, we had a sign. We had the belief sign. We had some other signs. But this was above all the lockers. Be a practice player first. I see a lot of kids now that play a lot of summer basketball or summer baseball. I used to coach AAU teams in the summer. I loved it. Some ways I loved it, some ways I didn't love it. But kids would never come to practice. But they would always show up for the games. Practice is where you get better. One of my proudest moments of my coaching career was, of course, winning one of our state championships. And after the game, our principal came up to me and put his arm around me. He says, Donnie, I'm so proud of you, your staff, your players on winning this first state championship in school history. And he said, but you know, the thing that I love and I'm most proud of you is you understand what's really important is how these kids end up 5, 10, 15 years from now. That's what's important to me. It really is. And if you do that, what we were trying to incorporate with our MVP was to build a successful team. Think about your team. Focused on respect, hard work, and teamwork. If you can get your team to play together, to work together, there's a difference between working and working together, isn't there? Everybody has to be pulling everything in the right direction, right? In the same direction. And it all came down to this. Creating a culture of winning starts with creating good people. That's it. That's what we focused on. Sometimes when you lose, you win. We were playing a game one night. It was an away game against a really, really good team. And I think that night they ended up beating us by about 30. It could have been 50, but the opposing coach was a good friend of mine. So he held the score down. But they played hard. Our kids played hard. They were coachable. We just played against a team that was better than us. They were just better. So after the game, the one thing that I've learned is I never get real high when things are going really well, and I never really get low when things are not going well. I always try to stay this way, especially after the game we just got pummeled. So in the locker room, I told our kids, I said, hey, we got beat by a better team tonight. You guys' effort were great. You did everything we asked you to do. They're just better than us right now. But the thing that I know about your kids' character, you're going to come back tomorrow and work hard, and you're going to be a goldfish. You're going to come back and stay focused on getting better. And again, it's easy to say that, but I always wanted to leave them with a couple things. Number one was this. How many of you ever been in locker rooms where you lost and the other team, and you could hear them in the locker room cheering? Yay, they won, right? They were celebrating. So as I'm talking to my kids, the same thing happened. And they needed to hear this. And it was true. I didn't say anything that I didn't really believe in. Kids, I still would rather be in this locker room than that one over there. They needed to know that I believed in them. And I always like to leave something that they could see as they left too. And this is one of my favorite quotes. You don't have to win a championship to be a champion. It's what you do every day. If you do the right things every day, you're creating value for yourself and your team, period. So the next morning, I'm teaching. I'm a math teacher. I'm teaching right now. Hopefully you're getting something out of this, right? I've been to clinics all over the country, and I've spoke at clinics all over the country. And I always tell people this, if you go there and you get one thing that's going to help you, it's well worth your time. If you try to get 50 things, then you don't get anything. So if you get one thing today that's going to help you with your philosophy and how you do things, then I've done my job. So there's a knock on my door. Of course, I'm as low as you can be. We got beat by 30. It's first hour in the morning. I probably stayed up late watching film, right? So I'm not doing real well. So it's my principal. And if you've ever taught, I teach, when an administrator wants to come in your room, what does that mean? Probably in trouble, right? Because that's really the only time you see him. He said, Donnie, can I say something to your class? So he gets up in front of my class and he says, kids, we're lucky to have the best basketball coach in Kansas. He's also a great math teacher, and he's a better person. Think about that. Would you run through a wall for that guy? Never forget that. You know, all of us love to say great things to our team when things are going well. But we also need to be able to tell them that you believe in them when things aren't going well, correct? You know, it's easy to say Hey, you're doing a great job when everything's going like this, right? But they need to hear it when things aren't going as well, as I did on that morning. I want you to be that leader, no matter whether things are going good or going bad, that you're the beacon of hope for your team, that you're positive every day, because you don't know what's going to happen. As a coach, there was something every day that you had, challenges you had to deal with. You need to make sure that your team believes in you. Thank you very much. This is so surreal for me. Think about it. I mean, 2.5 years ago, I'm teaching math. And because I coach Jason Sudeikis, I'm having the opportunity to speak to leaders like you. I'm very humbled. I really am. I hope you got something out of it. I really do care. I love meeting people. I think there's something going on tonight, right? I want to be there. I want to be there with you. Do you have any questions at all for me? We always normally have a Q&A. I don't know if we have time, but I always get questions wherever I go throughout the country. If you have a question for me, I'd love to answer it the best I can. Yes, sir.
I think I heard you say that you don't coach anymore. How bad do you miss it?
I get emotional. I just think sometimes all of us have interviewed for jobs. I never felt like I was the best coach. I always felt like I was the right coach. My time, I might not be the right coach. Does that make sense? I'm going to hold people accountable. I have standards. And when you have those standards, you have to have support. And hopefully you're supporting your people as leaders, because when you have people out in the field doing things, they're going to make mistakes. Now, do you want them making multiple mistakes? No. I've been so blessed. I've had great administrators to work for, great principals, great ADs. They didn't always agree with me. I'll tell you, I got time for a quick story. This is a great story. I was a young head coach, okay? I could tell stories all night. You guys don't, somebody just like my wife does at the back, she goes, "That's it, Donnie, shut up," okay? We're playing a game against a private school. And this is when I was at Shine Mission West. In fact, we were talking about this. I had some players we met the other night. They called me and said, "Coach, we're in Lee Summit. Will you meet us out here?" I said, "Oh, sure." So we're playing this private school, and I felt like our kids were getting, pardon my French, hosed. I thought it was 8-on-5. And I haven't had probably 3 technicals in my whole career. I don't say much to officials. I learned at a young age that I'm not a good enough coach to yell and scream at the officials and coach my team. That's not my strength by any means. Some coaches can, I can't. So one of the young officials came by our bench and I said, "You know, young man, after this game, you will never officiate another game in the Sunflower League." He stuck me. I opened my mouth again. He kicked me out of the gym. So I went to the locker room. I'm sitting in there. You know, isn't it amazing how certain things you remember? I can remember the showers dripping as I'm sitting. I'm embarrassed. I screwed up. Let's just be honest. I opened my mouth. I shouldn't have. So I go home that night, and I told my wife, I said, "I'm probably going to get fired." She goes, "What happened?" I said, "I got kicked out of the game." She goes, "No." I said, "No, I got kicked out of the game." So I just said, okay. I didn't sleep the whole night. I go in to the AD, and I'm just going to take my punishment, whatever it is. I'm going to get it over with. And I knew he was there early, so I went there before school. And I go in and says, "Hey," and I won't mention his name. He's still alive. But I said, "Hey, I screwed up last night. I shouldn't have done what I'd done. It will never happen again." He goes, "You know, you're right, Donnie. You're right. The officiating was terrible. You should have been kicked out the first quarter." And I said to him, he says, "Donnie, we all make mistakes." He goes, "The officiating wasn't very good. Just try not to do it again." And wow, I'd go through a wall for that guy too. because I didn't sleep. I was scared to death. I did something wrong. I took ownership of it and moved on. But someday, you know, I'm going to retire someday. I have 3 daughters I got to get married off. Probably working until I'm 100, which I get to teach. I love to teach. So I love going, you know, some mornings is a little harder for me to get up. But once I'm in that classroom, those kids just invigorate me. I love it. You guys invigorate me. Can you tell I get excited? I love teaching. That's what I miss about the gym. Teaching. Teaching. I see a lot of coaching now, but I don't see a lot of teaching. There's a difference. You know, there's also, are you winning? Are you trying to win? Do you want your organization to win, or do you want to be successful? There's a difference. Correct? And you guys all know, when I say guys, I mean gals too, okay? You all know that you have to make tough decisions, but make sure that you never compromise your values. Because once you start compromising your values, I can promise you very quickly, your team will go, pfft. You mark my word. I don't know if I went a long way around the mountain, but hopefully that answered your question. You bet. What else? Thank you. I hope I'll answer any question you want. You know, it's amazing too. I coached 5 Division I players. And you know one thing I learned very quickly at a young age? It's not about me. If you're a leader and it's about you, that's the problem. It's about your players. It's about your team members. How are you serving them? You know, our players, our senior leaders, how many have been on teams in which the younger players had to carry the bags and they got ostracized by the older players, veteran players? That never happened when I coach. Period. It never happened. Our leaders were the servants. They got the gym ready. They cleaned the gym floor. They got the balls out. They carried the bags when we traveled. When we paired them up in practice, it was always an older with a younger so they could mentor. They took great pride in that. When we went to away games, it was their responsibility to make sure that locker room was cleaner than what it was when we went there. They took great pride in all that. Because I always told them, kids, you leaders, and you should feel the same way too. And I tell my classroom every day, pick up around your desk, slide your chair in, always leave the world a little bit better place than what it was. So that's what I was trying to teach my kids every day. Oh, I've got a lot of them. You know, the world works wrong. You know, I wish I had the wisdom that I do now, but I'm still learning. And I think about some things that I've said to players over the years that I wish I could bring them and put my arm around and say, hey, I didn't really mean that. I think it's so important as you learn through wisdom, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. But my kids, you know, one of my ADs says this, Donnie, he says, I don't agree how you coach. I was never demeaning. I was demanding, but I wasn't demeaning. And he says, you know, I can say whatever you want to say about you, coach, but let me tell you this right now, your players are loyal to you. Period. And that's what I wanted. I was loyal to them too. So if you have team members that are loyal to you, you have to be loyal to them. And the regrets, I think it's just things I've said over the years that I wish I could have taken back. I think I mentioned a story about that in the locker room. I really believe this too. You can't coach mad. You can't lead mad. You can act mad, because when you coach mad, many times you say and do things you shouldn't do. Does that make sense? And the best leaders that I've been around, best principals, they're always like this. And if they had a difficult discussion that they didn't like that I did, he never embarrassed me, they would bring me in and talk to me. And I could tell by the way they talked to me, they really cared for me. But I had to change. Something, I don't know. I've just been blessed. I've had really good players. You know, I've learned when you got really good players, you're a really smart coach. When you don't have very good players, you're not as smart, right? Correct? Yes, sir.
Quick question. A little while ago, you gave us an example where one of the coaches that acted somewhat out of character
Mm-hmm.
and aggressive in their behavior, it wasn't a good impression as a coach. Yet, one of your good friends, Bob Knight, had that character in him. Yet he goes down in history as being the greatest, not a horse's behind. What did he do to change that impression?
Well, I don't think I love Coach, but I didn't love everything he did. I love Coach. He did a lot for me. He taught me. Now, I'm not talking about how he acted sometimes, correct? He taught me how to teach the game. You know, a lot of people play the game, but that doesn't mean that they can coach the game. I can still remember driving to Bloomington. I ran his camp every summer, helped him with camp. I went up there he had a coaching clinic every year. There would be 1,000 coaches there. He opened up his practices. You got to watch 6 practices. Everything they did. He didn't hide anything. And I was sitting up there in the stands in Assembly Hall, and I'm watching practice. And I just, wow. This is how the game should be played. Teamwork. Commitment to each other. So what I'm saying is, everybody has their things that aren't perfect, right? Coach had some things that weren't perfect. And I understand. I still love him, though. You know?
So that means that his talents overrode his.
Well, they're speaking really great things about him now. But, you know, I'll tell you a funny story about it. Could I have time to tell a funny story about Coach Knight? Please. Coach was speaking at a clinic at Avila College, a Nike clinic. And I'm sorry that you guys, gals, didn't get the opportunity to listen to him speak. He's a phenomenal speaker. So I called him up. I said, hey, Coach, I know you and Karen are coming to the Nike clinic. You're going to speak. It would be an honor for me to pick you up at the airport, take you to the clinic, take you to the hotel, get you wherever you need to go. It'd be an honor for me. Oh, that'd be great, Donnie. So I go get him at the airport. It's like Michael Jackson getting off the airport. I mean, everybody wants an autograph. He's a big guy. I mean, I'm big. But I'm going to tell you this right now. He walks in right now, you know it's Bob Knight. He has that presence about him. So I pick him up, him and Karen, and he met a guy there that this guy he met on the plane wanted Coach to come speak to his company about leadership. So, and that night he wanted to take Coach out and his wife, Karen, for a steak dinner at Sullivan's. Well, Karen, she's been down that road 100 times. She just wants to go back to the hotel and rest, right? Coach says, well, can Donnie go? So that night I got to eat a steak and everything paid for at Sullivan's in Overland Park. Well, the next day I get Coach, take him to the clinic. He's speaking. He was great. And he gets done. And people want autographs. They want pictures. I said, Coach, we got to go. I said, I mean, if we run into traffic, you're not going to make your flight. So, sure enough, we get in my truck, and Karen's in the back seat, and Coach is in the front, and we're driving down 435 to the airport, and sure enough, what happens? We end in construction. So Coach says, so I'm behind a bunch of cars, and his coach says, just go off in the side of the road and just drive. I said, Coach, I can't do that. I'm going to get a ticket. Just do it. So I'm driving on the side of the road. You know, people are giving me hand gestures, I'm sure, if I remember right. So we come to this viaduct, you know, and I can't get underneath between the cars because they were all jammed in there, so I had to go up and around. Coach says, just go between them. I said, Coach, I can't. I said, I'm going to get a ticket. Just do it. I said, Coach, I am not doing it. So he looked at me and he said, you know, Donnie, you're a really good guy, but you're a CS driver. And that's Coach. So when I would text him, I would say, hey, Coach, this is the CS driver from Kansas City. Hope you're doing well. And Karen would just giggle. So I haven't had a chance to reach out to Karen and send my condolences. I sent something, but I will. But again, all of us, I don't judge people. I mean, there's somebody that I feel is bigger than me to judge, right? That's just my opinion. So my wife says to me all the time, she goes, and I think it comes through your faith. And again, I'm not being religious or anything, but my own faith is, I don't judge people. I try to be kind to everybody. And that's just, my parents, I'm from a small town in Kansas, Lyons, Kansas. My dad was a machinist for 40 years. He came from a family of 14 kids. 15, one died stillborn. And he was in World War II, was in Hiroshima the day after it was bombed. They were getting ready to land in Japan. He was in 3 landings. This was one he didn't have to go to. So I didn't get, I was a very disciplined family. My mom worked for the government as a secretary. And one of the things that I use with my players, and I still use in the classroom, I had just 2 rules. Number 1, you'll be positive. You will be positive. What do we have trouble with in our world now? Lack of respect. And number 2 is you will not use profanity. I called that my Vi Campbell rules. That was my mother's name. Those are the rules I had. That's all I had in my classroom. And again, that's with me too. Because, I'm not perfect. I've slipped. I slipped and I apologized to my team. Hey, that should have never happened. My bad. Won't happen again. This is so much fun. I could stay here all morning. I'm going to be in my classroom. I want you to think about it. I get kids that are a lot younger than you that I get to teach math. And it's awesome. It's no different than how I coached. Is that it? Awesome. Thank you, guys, gals. Can I say one thing? This is number 20 for me, speaking. Yeah, you think, God, you spoke 20 times. That's terrible, right? But I go around the country speaking now. It's awesome. And it's amazing. VINCUE is tremendous. You can just tell there's great leadership. Because I go to different places and speak. It's totally different. You can tell there's no leadership. VINCUE is awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Great job.